This is Professor John Krumboltz. He was my PhD advisor, and he's an expert on career counseling.
I think one of the reasons why we wanted to interview you, you had helped Greg on his dissertation in education, and he thought you had some really great stories and history around not just education, but life lessons.
What did you want to be when you were a little kid? What was your aspiration?
Say when I was 12 years old, my parents, my mother and father, used to ask me, well, John, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up, but they kept asking me and asking me. And at the time, I was playing baseball with other 12-year-old boys, and I had the first base position because I was the only one on the team with a first baseman's glove. Finally, I decided, well, I've got to tell my parents something, see? And also at the same time, I was starting to learn to play the clarinet at my elementary school because they were going to set up a band there in the elementary school. And I used to listen to the radio. This was long before television. I used to listen to the radio, and the New York Philharmonic Orchestra used to play symphonic music, which I loved, Beethoven's symphony. I finally decided that I have to tell my parents something about what I want to be when I grow up. The next time they asked me, I said, well, I've decided what I want to be when I grow up, and during the spring and summer, I am going to be playing first base for the Chicago Cubs. And then during the fall and winter, I'm going to be playing first chair clarinet for the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. So you might wonder, well, what did your parents say after you told them what you wanted to be when you grow up? Is that what you're wondering? They said absolutely nothing. Before they asked me this question, they'd asked me this question maybe 24 times, and I never could give them an answer. Then if I gave them an answer, and after I gave them this answer, they said nothing, absolutely nothing. But the good news was that they never asked me again what I wanted to be when I grew up.
What were some of the mistakes that you've made in your life and career as you've gone through the process of exploring?
What were some of the mistakes I made?
Yeah.
You know, I have been making mistakes my entire life. I am still making mistakes. See? And I don't think that making mistakes, I used to think that making mistakes was a bad thing. And I no longer think that. I think that making mistakes is perhaps the best way to learn. Because you learn when you make a mistake because you're doing something that's wrong or ineffective. And so that's an important thing to know if you do something wrong or ineffective. But you don't know it unless you've made a mistake. See, so a lot of people are afraid of making mistakes. And what I like to do is encourage people to make mistakes. In fact, I even co-authored a book, Fail Fast, Fail Often.
Yeah.
Fail fast, fail often. And you'd think, well, nobody would want to buy that book, but actually quite a few people have wanted to buy that book because they go, this sounds like a crazy book. But actually, I'm serious about it. So if you say, well, tell me some mistakes you've made, well, I'd have to talk to you for 12 months just to start describing all the mistakes I've made. I can't even remember them all.
Do you have a favorite failure that set you up for later success?
Favorite failure, oh gosh. I don't have them categorize my failures as good or bad, so it's hard for me to even recall. I mean, I don't even have a category in my head of good failures, bad failures. See, so I can't answer your question. I'm sorry, but actually, as we keep talking, I will probably think of things that I've done that were good or bad. Or
what's some of the worst advice that you see or hear being dispensed in your world? The worst advice. Yeah.
Worst advice.
Yeah. So you might think maybe the advice fail fast, fail often is like terrible advice, but in fact that's good advice because people learn through their failures.
Well, that would be correct. Yes.
But what are some advice that you think is really bad?
Advice that's bad? Oh gosh. Well, if you fail, give up. That would be bad advice. Well, I know another one is sort of similar. like suppose you're in the sales business. You think, well, I'm afraid to go and ask this person if they would buy my product because they will probably turn me down. See, that would be a bad thought. See, because you ought to go and ask that person if they'll buy your product, even if they do turn you down. Because what you ought to be doing is making friends with everybody you talk with. Because even though they might not buy your product that day, they might buy it some other day. And or you might come back and see them a second time. You might make a relationship with them that would lead to something in the future. I would say the best advice is don't be discouraged when something you try to do doesn't work the first time you try to do it. I mean, I think it with almost everything. I mean, I used to play softball at Buchanan Elementary School. How did I learn to play softball? Did someone teach me how? Someone give me a lesson in it? No. We just went out there and we started playing the game. And I used to like to play in the shortstop position in softball because I used to like to catch this bouncing ball that would come, and it always bounced in irregular ways because the field we played on was not a smooth field. It was kind of bumpy, so the ball would not bounce in a predictable way. So I had to judge it, and I had to catch it, and I had to throw it over to the first baseman in time to catch the runner. And that was always one of the most enjoyable things in my elementary school life. But I made many mistakes. I mean, I often missed the ball. I often threw it so the first baseman couldn't catch it. Or sometimes the runner would get to first base before I could get around to throwing it fast enough. So I made dozens and dozens of mistakes learning to play baseball when I was just a kid. And I have been making mistakes ever since. So I don't know if you're asking me for all the mistakes I made. I mean, it's just, I wouldn't even know where to start with that question. So,
what are some of the key problems in the educational system that you'd like to see change?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me that question. I think that the worst thing that goes on in higher education is the reliance on the lecture method as a way of teaching. Because what is the lecture method? I went to college at Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Coe College, and almost every professor taught by the lecture method. And the system was, you go to the first class meeting, and the professor says, how many of you have bought the textbook? And almost nobody had. So he said, okay, we'll dismiss class, we'll all go to the bookstore and buy a textbook, and come back on Wednesday. So we'd come back on Wednesday, and the professor would then give a lecture for 50 minutes, 50-minute lecture. And we were supposed to take notes because there was going to be a midterm exam and there was going to be a final exam, and we would be questioned as to what we had learned in the class. That's the way it was done. Every class, and I took 18 classes at Coe College, all by the lecture method. And about 5 years after I graduated, I was thinking, what did I learn from those lectures that I remember? Thought and thought and thought. Well, let's see, what I finally thought that maybe there was one thing I remembered. What was that? Something about where some country was located, some city was located in Nebraska, Omaha, I think it was. I think Omaha was on the Missouri River. I'm not sure, but I remembered it at the time. But that's the one thing I remembered from all these lectures, the location of Omaha, Nebraska. And I thought, wow, how much money did I spend in tuition at Coe College to listen to all these lectures? And the only thing I remember 5 years later is where Omaha, Nebraska is located. I wonder if there's anything wrong with that lecture method as a way of teaching people. Obviously there is. And why? It's because the lecture method is a really good way for the professor to learn something, because the professor has to prepare the lecture and know what is important and what's not important, and make lots of judgments and make notes of what to say and what not to say. But all the student has to do is to be a stenographer and copy down words that are spoken out loud. Not necessarily understanding them, but writing them down, because they might be on the midterm or final exam, and you have to try to memorize as many words as possible in order to pass the class. So, what I'm saying is that this lecture method is the worst possible way to teach. And recently, the new president of Stanford University, where I am working now, and his associate, we want to improve what Stanford University is doing, and they asked for suggestions from everybody around. I got suggestions from about 2,000 people. I sent them a suggestion, and my suggestion was abolish the lecture method. Now, I don't know whether they are going to do that. I didn't explain why. I didn't tell them this story that I just told you. But I doubt that they will, because the lecture method is sort of a long tradition that goes back to the Middle Ages, before the printing press was invented. That's why they had to give lectures back in those days. It's a tradition that has continued all the time to the present time, and it's time to abolish it. So that is my recommendation.
I'm kind of curious about what advice you gave your two daughters when they were trying to decide what career they wanted to pursue.
You know, my two daughters, I'm not sure they ever asked me what they should do. Oh, well, I had one daughter, Jenny, who told me she used to like to go out at night and lie on the grass and look up at the night sky. She used to like to look at the stars and imagine what was going on in the stars. Sometimes I would go out and lie on the grass and we would talk out there, try to speculate about who was living on those stars and what they might be thinking. Could they see us? I mean, we just talk, just gab about stuff. It was just nonsense, but it was communication, father-daughter communication. And it was fun. She enjoyed doing it, I enjoyed doing it. After a while, we got tired of it, got up and went back in the house and did whatever we did. Listen, I never told my daughters what they should do about their careers. Never. I mean, I did learn that lesson. I'm not sure they even ever asked me. They've done amazing things. I mean, my daughter Anne is sort of head of a organization that's headquartered in Washington State. The purpose of it is to preserve the environment of the world, preserving the environment, so we don't kill all the trees and rivers and everything. We leave the world in a healthy state, see? And she's worried that all the people that are building highways and buildings and everything are destroying the basic wonders of the world that we live in. And she's trying to help preserve the national environment. That's Anne. And my daughter, Jenny, is now working at a university in Southern California. She's head of the art department, not teaching art, but the university publishes a publication that goes out to all the alumni, and she's in charge of the artwork in that publication. And she's very proud of this job, and she showed me some of the work she's done. It's really beautiful. So that's what my two daughters are doing. And you asked me what kind of advice did I give them, and the answer is none at all. None at all.
And what advice were you given when you were a child about your career?
Well, I told you how my parents asked me to decide what I wanted to do, and I told them, but I didn't actually do any of the things, of course, that I decided then. But they never asked me again, and they never told me again what I should do. I really took charge of my own life, and I did things that I wanted to do or thought I should do, or took advantage of opportunities that came along. Both my mother and father were wonderful. They were supportive, they were helpful. If I asked questions, they would answer them. But they didn't boss me around. They didn't try to control me. I'm sort of a self-made man, if you want to put it that way. But I've been in charge of my own life, and I'm still in charge of my own life, and I I like being in charge of my own life, and I hope to do that as long as I live. I'd like to live forever, but I don't think that's going to happen. Since I've done some statistics on this, I've discovered that everybody has to die, and there's no substitute for that. Since I'm a human being living on planet Earth, it probably happened to me too. And what I've learned is that it's not only true of human beings, but it's true of every living creature on planet Earth. Every animal, like dogs, for example. How long does a dog live? If a dog gets to be a teenager, why, that's pretty old for a dog. And then that dog dies. What about redwood trees? Well, redwood trees can live for maybe 400 years, but they die too. Everything dies. So what? No big deal. Just the way it is. And while we're alive, let's have fun. That's the way I look at it.
What is your purpose in life?
It's my purpose.
Yeah, your mission in life.
I didn't know I had to have a purpose. Well, I'd say my purpose is to enjoy every minute of my life. I'm enjoying our conversation right now. I enjoyed having breakfast with you. I don't think I do anything that I don't enjoy.
So you wrote a book, Fail Fast and Fail Often.
Yes.
That's a big statement in Silicon Valley. People say that a lot.
They do say it a lot?
Oh, yeah. It's like a common saying, fail fast, fail often.
Well, maybe that book contributed to it then. It was sort of a radical idea at the time that we wrote that book. The notion that you should deliberately fail. So many people are afraid to fail that they don't try things. And if you don't try something, you don't know whether you can do it or not. See, and one thing I have learned is that you ought to be trying lots of different things. You ought to be experimenting all your life, like meeting new people. What if the new person doesn't like me? Well, so what if they don't like you? That's not a big deal. You say, I'd like to get to know you. Well, I don't want to know you. If they said that, nobody's ever said that, but if they did, well, that would be good information to have. Okay, that's one person that doesn't want to know me. Good. Okay, well, I won't waste my time with that person. I'll talk to somebody else. See? So it's the fear of failure that is the biggest hindrance to success, I think. And I don't even know what success is. I don't know whether I've been successful or not, but I've had fun all of my life, and I'm still having fun. And I'm having fun right now, talking to you guys.
Are there cultures that I've heard other countries, they actually are terrified to fail? Like it's looked down upon.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, there are a lot of people in the United States who are terrified to fail. I think it's one of the problems with education is that we have this grading system, A, B, C, D, F.
Nobody wants to know.
And it's very hard to get an A. Very hard to get an A. See, so the people even get as B's feel like they failed. And C's are worse, and D's are worse, and F's are out of this world. Everyone goes to school fearful. It's the wrong way to approach education. We ought to be approaching education as fun, enjoyable. You're learning something all the time, learning something new, something you didn't know before. Wow, I didn't know about that. I didn't know about the stars. I didn't know what animals did. I am so ignorant, but I would like to know about everything. I'm interested in history. I'm interested in how did the United States get built? Who was George Washington? What was he really like? I mean, I have zillions of questions that are sort of in my mind, and so my favorite activity now that I'm retired from Stanford University, my favorite activity is reading books. But I love to learn, and I'm reading new books all the time, and I'm learning some really fascinating facts. I'll even tell you some of them if you want to hear them. You want to hear them? Well, who was it that murdered President Kennedy? You don't know who murdered President Kennedy?
Oswald or something?
Yes, Lee Harvey Oswald was the one who was blamed for it and was about to be tried for it, except that he got murdered himself before they could get him to the police station. But then you might wonder, well, who murdered Lee Harvey Oswald? Well, I think I know who murdered Lee Harvey Oswald, because I read a book that didn't actually say who did it, but it gave so many facts about everybody that was involved at that time that I know who murdered President Kennedy, and it was not Lee Harvey Oswald. See, one of the big mistakes that we make is to believe that the person who pulls the trigger on a gun is the person who committed the murder. Actually, it's the person who hired the person who pulled the trigger, who was the one who actually committed the murder. That's sort of a radical idea, but I think it's a very sensible idea that it's the, it's the person who orders the murder that should be held responsible for it. And the person who pulls the trigger is often a poor ne'er-do-well who is getting paid maybe $10,000 to pull the trigger.
What are some of the things that you're most worried about in the world nowadays?
What am I worried about in the world? Well, right now, right this minute, right this day, I'm worried about this North Korea situation. North Korea is threatening the United States, sending missiles in this direction. And North Korea now has nuclear weapons. And they're talking about hitting the United States with a nuclear weapon. They might hit Washington, D.C., or San Francisco, or Chicago, or I don't know which city they will hit. But they could kill millions of people with a nuclear weapon now. Well, now President Trump is threatening war on North Korea. North Korea is now threatening to shoot down United States aircraft that are flying in the Pacific Ocean, not even over Korea. So I'm worried that there's going to be a terrible war, a nuclear war. And I don't want the United States to be dropping nuclear bombs on Korea, North Korea. Why? Because North Korea is led by one man, one dictator, Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un is the dictator of North Korea, and he is leading what's going on over there. And the people who are citizens of North Korea have no power whatsoever. They didn't elect him. He became the dictator because his father was the dictator before, and before his father was dictator, his grandfather was a dictator. So when Kim Jong-un became dictator, he had a history of being a dictator, and that's all he knew, and that's all he did. And now nobody in North Korea dares utter any opinion that is contrary to what the dictator believes should be said. Otherwise, they get sent to prison, and the punishments in North Korea are very severe. Remember, there was one American that went there and came back all disturbed and eventually died after spending a year in North Korea. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible environment. I don't know how it's going to end, but I hope it doesn't end in a nuclear war, because I don't want the North Korean people to be destroyed by an atomic weapon.
Do you think that there's more countries getting nuclear weapons? Well, at first it was the US, and then Russia, and then now I think there's 8 or 9 countries. Do you think all the countries will eventually get nuclear weapons? And then
Well, right now I understand that there are now 8 countries in the world who have stockpiles of nuclear weapons, like England and France and Germany and a lot of other countries. I don't know all of them. And there's sort of an understanding that we shouldn't be using them. I mean, that's sort of a general agreement that we're not going to be using nuclear weapons on each other. Well, but see, the trouble is that all it takes is one leader in one country who gets mad at some leader in some other country and has control over the nuclear weapons. It says, hey, let's go nuke old Joe over here in the next country and teach him a lesson. Well, then Joe in the next country is not going to tolerate that, and so he's got a nuke. See, I have no idea of the possible devastation that could occur in the world if we start throwing nuclear weapons at each other. In fact, there's a book called The Martian Chronicles. Have you seen this book? You know what happened in The Martian Chronicles? People from the United States used to go to Mars and sort of started a tiny little establishment there, and one guy started to build a sort of little restaurant. He thought he'd make $1 million because all the people from Earth would come to Mars and would have to go to his restaurant to buy food. But suddenly there was no longer any communication between Mars and Earth. And there was just sort of a little footnote in this book. A war took place in about 37, war, 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 and then silence. The book is very clever because it doesn't say who fought who won, who lost. It's just that there was no longer any communication between anybody on Earth and anybody. There's no longer any communication from planet Earth. So what I'm thinking is, I'll bet what happened was, this is all in my imagination now, what happened probably was that there was some kind of a nuclear war that took place, probably in the 1930s. I mean, the 2030s, sorry. And every human being on planet Earth was killed. That's what I'm afraid of.
Kind of seems like things are going that direction, right? With all these countries getting nuclear weapons.
All these countries have nuclear weapons,
So,
and there are more countries that want nuclear weapons because their neighbor has a nuclear weapon, see? And pretty soon, there'll be every country in the world that will have nuclear weapons.
and then somebody will light it off.
Somebody will
trigger.
hit somebody else with it, and that could start a retaliation.
So if that's where we're headed, like say 50 years out, then what's the point of, like, for example, building bridges or educating children if it's all gonna
It's all going to destroy.
get destroyed?
Well, the way I look at it is, we shouldn't destroy the world by our own fear of nuclear weapons. I think our job is to build a better world, build a happier world, a world that's more fun for everybody. And we shouldn't be threatening other people with devastation or anything else. So I'm a little bit worried about the way our world is organized now. It's sort of, I mean, in many ways it's better than it ever used to be. That is, a lot of nations now are in peaceful relationships with each other, like France and Germany. I mean, there were times when they were at war with each other, but they're not at war with each other. They're at least friendly with each other now. That's good. We ought to be friendly with people all over the world. People in Africa and Asia and South America, as well as Europe. And we ought to be friendly with everybody. That's what would make a happy world for me. I think in some ways we're moving in that way. There's some parts of our world that's moving in that direction, but some parts are not. See, and all it takes is just one of these dictators to launch one of these nuclear weapons to start the world down a path that we don't want to go down. That's what I'm worried about.
The way you think about it is that could happen, and we're kind of heading in that direction in a way, but it hasn't happened yet. So let's just do everything we can within our power to keep the world in
keep this world in a
and
peaceful, friendly, mutually supportive direction. That's what I think we need to be doing. And I think in many ways we are doing that already. In many ways we are, but not always. That's what I'm worried about.
Does the risk of nuclear war keep you up at night so that you lose
No,
sleep?
it doesn't keep me up at night. I get a good night's sleep every night. I don't spend my time worrying about it, because the time that happens, I'll be dead. See, right now I'm 88 years old. How long do people live? See, nobody lives. See, I would like to live forever, but I'm not going to. Nobody gets to live forever. How long do people live? See, I would now like to live to be 100 years old. You could say, well, why 100? Well, because 100 is a 3-digit number.
It's more than 88.
It's more than 99.
Yeah.
But it's a long way from 100 to 1,000. See, that's 4 digits. See, and so I don't expect to live to be 1,000. But there are some people that do make it to 100. Not very many, but few make it to 100. And I'd sort of like to be in that group. But the longest anybody has ever lived on planet Earth, right now there are
7 billion.
I don't even know what a billion is. I've never seen a billion people. They're just numbers. I'd hate to see the whole planet Earth destroyed, although it's fair to say that I'm reasonably sure, in fact I'm positive, that there is life elsewhere in the universe. See, now here's another topic that I'm sure is controversial, but UFOs. Are UFOs real? Damn betcha they're real. How do I know? Because I saw one myself. Hear me tell you how I saw one. I was a cadet. I went through ROTC at Coe College. We had to do a summer internship at Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado. And one day I came out from one of these meetings we had, and with one of my buddies, we saw this vehicle in the sky right above us, about maybe pretty low, about maybe 200 feet up in the air, sort of a cylinder-shaped vehicle coming through the air at a really rapid pace, only in our field of view for overhead for maybe 1 or 2 seconds, and it kept going straight ahead, and I kept watching it, and then it made a sharp right angle turn. And when I say sharp right angle, I mean sharp right angle. Not, an airplane kind of curves when it makes a turn, but this thing went like that. And then it went for another 2 seconds, and it went, it made a left turn, also a sharp left turn, sharp left angle turn, and disappeared into the distance. And I said to this buddy of mine standing next to me, I said, "Did you see that thing?" And he says, "Yeah, I saw it." I said, "What do you think it was?" He says, "I don't know, and I don't give a shit." That was what he said, direct quote. So we didn't talk about it anymore, but it clearly was not a plane made on planet Earth. It wasn't shaped like, it didn't have any wings. It didn't make any noise. It wasn't too high. I mean, it was I estimate 200 feet up in the air above ground, going very fast. It was real.
Did people believe you when you said that you saw
Oh,
this?
some people did, some people didn't. But there are a lot of people in the world who do believe. See, I am now a member of an organization called MUFON, MUFON, Mutual Unidentified Flying Object Network. And they keep track of UFO sightings. Recently, I just received a book, a gift, of sightings of UFOs in the United States. The book gives a list of the number of sightings of UFOs in the United States in the last 15 years. And there's something like 200,000 sightings by citizens of the United States who have reported sightings. And it's organized by state and county. And then it also classifies the shape of the UFO. They're not all, the one we saw in Colorado was sort of cigar shaped, but they're not all cigar shaped. They come in about 15 different shapes. So they may not all come from the same place in the sky. I don't know where they come from. I don't know nobody knows where they come from. The other thing is, how does the United States government treat UFO sightings? Do you know how they treat them? Top secret, classified, top secret. Why would the government classify UFO sightings as top secret if they know something about them?
Anything in the sky can be dangerous. Anything coming in the sky can be dangerous.
Well, yes, it could be dangerous.
Anything.
Yeah.
Planes,
But what if they're not really true? What if nothing really is coming from the sky, you see? What it's people's imagination that they think they see them, see? This is the way they try to, this is just people making up stories, see? But if it's just people making up stories, why would you classify it as top secret? They wouldn't classify it top secret if it wasn't really happening. This is what I'm saying. Yeah. It is really happening. I know it is happening. I saw it myself with my own eyes. I know it's happening.
Do you believe in the stories of people being abducted by aliens, like kind of kidnapped and like?
Well, I think there have been a few cases of stories like that, and I wouldn't be surprised. But probably it has happened. But I don't think that the people or the beings from other parts of the universe are necessarily hostile. You see, my personal theory about it is that these beings that are inside these spaceships, if you want to call them that, or these UFOs, are graduate students who are collecting data for their dissertations. We've had students who would go to Africa to live with the natives in Africa to kind of find out about their culture. I don't know what the natives in South Africa thought about these white people who showed up and wanted to talk to them. There are often graduate students that wanted to write a dissertation about it, or people that wanted to write a book that would make money. So I'm reasonably sure that there might be some hostile people coming from the other parts of the universe, but most of them are, or I say very few of them are hostile. Very, very few. And millions of them have come and been seen and reported by U.S. citizens, and citizens not just in the U.S., but every country in the world has people and organizations that have tallied these UFO sightings. Well, I have no doubt but what is real. No doubt at all. Now you could say, well, Krumboltz, you're crazy. Well, maybe I'm crazy. I mean, that's a possibility. I don't think I am. I think I'm perfectly rational, and I think I know what I've seen, and I know what other people have seen, and I know what other people have reported. And if I'm crazy, then there are millions and millions of other people in the world are crazy just like I am.
Just to take the conversation in a slightly different direction, do you believe that we will invent an artificial intelligence, so turn computers into human-like entities that are smarter than us?
Well, will we develop artificial human beings? Maybe so. I mean, I don't know. The world is a marvelous place and a mysterious place, and we are gradually learning more and more about it. And we're learning how to cure illnesses now that we didn't know how to cure before. Maybe we'll develop some cure that will enable people to live forever. I don't know. I'm not competent to predict what the future will be. But I also don't spend worrying about what the future will be. I don't know. It could be good, it could be bad. I'll probably be dead by the time it happens, so I won't care.
How has the iPhone helped improve your life?
Oh, well, that's a completely different topic, isn't it? How has the iPhone affected my life? Well, it has amazingly. I mean, I am just absolutely intrigued with the iPhone. It is miraculous what it can do, I think. At first, I thought it was just going to be a telephone I could put in my pocket and talk to people like a regular telephone. But it can do millions of other things besides that.
What's been the most high impact in the last year or so?
Of what I've learned from the iPhone,
How you've been using it?
what I found is I can talk to people anywhere in the world free of charge. So I'll tell you another story about that. I was over in Korea. They invited me over there to give a talk, and I had the cell phone with me. My cell phone rang, and it was a woman who was living in Ohio who was calling me on my cell phone while I'm in Korea. I didn't know that you could have this long distance around the world calling. Didn't even know it was possible. And she said, I'm calling you because my mother has just died. And my mother was one of my best friends when I was at Columbia University. I haven't told about Columbia University yet, but I got my master's degree from Columbia University. And her name was Gertrude. And Gert and I were good buddies because we used to talk about everything under the world. Her mother had died, Gert had died, and they wanted me to come to Ohio to give a memorial service for her. Would I come to Ohio and preside at this service? And I said, sure, I would. So sorry to hear that she died. She was my best friend at Columbia University. Wanted to be represented there. So I did. When they had that ceremony, by that time I was finished with my business in Korea and I was back in the United States, and so I went to Ohio to do this business. I did. I gave a tribute to Gert in Ohio. But I found out about it when I was in Korea, and it was sort of...
You were in such a foreign environment, yet they were able to reach you just unexpectedly.
Yes, and we could talk just normal, just like you and I are talking now. It was just normal conversation. We could hear each other clearly, halfway around the world. And I could carry the phone in my pocket. I didn't even have to plug it in anywhere. I didn't have to be connected to any other wires. I can contact now anybody in the world. And anybody in the world can contact me. Well, this is wonderful if we use it positively. If we use it in a friendly way, this is wonderful. We call each other up and call each other bad names. That's not going to be a good idea. But if we're friends with each other, which we should be, it could be a great tool for peace in the world. I think that's the greatest potential advantage of it.
Could you tell us that story you were telling us at breakfast about the woman that came to your office and asked?
Well, yes. You see, because one of the things that I got sort of a reputation of helping people as they were struggling with their career decisions. We're right in this room where we're talking right now, and there was a knock on that door right over there. I went to the door and opened it. She said, I came to see you because I want you to tell me what I should do with my life. And I said, well, I don't have the slightest idea. I don't even know what you like to do. And she said, well, I like to write. I said, well, come on in, sit down. And she came in, she sat down right at that chair where you're sitting right now. We had a delightful conversation. It lasted about an hour. And she looked at her watch. She said, oh my gosh, it's noon and I'm supposed to be somewhere else. I got to get up and go now. And she got up, she started walking toward the door, and then she said, hey, wait a minute. I came here because I wanted you to tell me what I should do with my life, and you haven't told me. And I said, you said you like to write. Write an article. She just walked out the door. Never seen her since. Okay, time goes by. Oh, got an email. Got an email from Japan was the first one. First, some man in Japan sent me an email. Said, I understand that you will help people. You will help tell people what they should do with their life. What should I do with my life? Then a few days later, I got another email from a woman in China. Said the same thing. And then I started getting emails from different countries all around the world. Denmark, France, England, some from Asia. Everybody had the same question. Please tell me what I should do with my life. And of course, I don't know what anybody should do with their life. But I answered every single email that I got. Basically told them this, I certainly like to tell you if I knew, but I don't know, but you need to do this by exploration, by trying different things, blah, blah, blah.
How is it that all these people started contacting you?
Now, let me ask you a question. How would you guess that people knew that I should be contacted?
The First Lady.
The First Lady must have written an article, and she did. She wrote an article in Forbes magazine about how I discovered what I should do with my life or something like that. And she mentioned my name in this article.
So she became a writer.
She became a writer. That's the story of what happened. So she probably wrote that article in Forbes magazine and it was read by people. Forbes magazine probably has a circulation around the world. I don't know. An international circulation.
When I Googled your name, career counseling came up.
See, I sort of got a reputation for doing it. Now, you could ask me, how did I get that reputation?
Here's one thing that I read online. It said, and it's from an article that just popped up as one of the first results in Google. It said, and this is from you. I don't know when you said it, but you said, what would be fun and helpful to try next? You believe your career counseling should teach us how to take advantage of unplanned events. And it's one of your theories that luck is no accident.
Uh-huh.
So that's what Google brought up. You got this online reputation for your career counseling.
At College, I majored in psychology. Why did I major in psychology? All right, I'll tell you.
Wasn't your parents?
Everything was an accident.
Something drove you to become this source of where people reach out to you, right? And career counseling is clearly, when I Google you, there's a lot of interesting stuff here.
But see, the point is that none of it was planned. Everything in my own life has been an accident. I mean, here I am, Stanford University, sitting in this office with you two guys. Did I plan that? Did I ever plan that? I didn't even know I was going to do that yesterday. Well, I guess I did know it yesterday. I didn't know it a week ago. And I'm having a good time talking to you two guys. I don't know whether you're having a good time or not. I hope you are, but I don't really care whether or not. As long as I'm having a good time. So we ought to be enjoying life. This is what I love. Well, but see, a lot of people think that they have to get an occupation, that it has to make a lot of money, and they have certain criteria that they have to satisfy. They have to satisfy their parents or somebody else. And so I've never had to go through all that torture to do it. It's just sort of just one accident after another, after another, after another. And some people have asked me, well, how did you get to be a professor at, when did you decide to be a professor at Stanford University? I never decided to be a professor at Stanford University. I never decided that. Well, but here you are. Well, yeah, but I didn't decide it. When I was at Columbia University, I majored in psychology at College, and I went to Columbia University because I got a fellowship there. And why did I get a fellowship at Columbia University? Because Columbia University had by accident, somebody at College told me that Columbia University had a scholarship that they paid only to people who had been born in Iowa. Well, I had been born in Iowa, and after I graduated from College, I didn't know what to do. Somebody told me there when I was wondering about what I should do, said, I was just reading this journal article, and there was an article about what Columbia University has a scholarship, a fellowship available only to people who were born in Iowa. And he said, you could apply for it, but I don't think you'll get it. That's all he said to me. You could apply for it, but I don't think you'll get it. Well, so I got all the paperwork from Columbia University, and I filled out all the forms, and I mailed them in. And by golly, I got this fellowship at Columbia University. That's how I got to Columbia University in New York City.
Random. Luck.
Oh, just
Luck.
luck. Just dumb luck is how I got there. And when I got there, I didn't know what to major in at Columbia University. So since I'd majored in psychology at Coe College, I went to the psychology department and I said, well, here I am, and I'm ready to go to work. And this guy who was greeting the new arrivals said, well, what kind of psychology are you interested in? And I said, oh, is there more than one type? Oh, yeah, there are dozens of different types of psychology. And then he started rattling off, clinical, blah, 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 physiological, blah, 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 all these names of different kinds of psychology. And I didn't know. Oh, and he said, oh, and there's educational. And the only word he said that I understood was the word educational. All these other types were just mysterious gobbledygook to me, see? So I said, well, education sounds good. Oh, he said, well, then you're in the wrong place. He says, you should go across the street, go across 125th Street to Teachers College, and that's where they teach school counseling. I walked out the door and went across 125th Street, went to Teachers College, walked in the front door, and there was a long line of people waiting to interview the people who wanted to register. I stood in line for 2 hours till I got to the end of the line. And there was this nice lady sitting on a desk, and she says, I'm writing down the names of people who are interested in becoming school counselors. Are you interested in that? I said, oh, yeah, sure. Okay, and so she wrote down my name, and I saw, and she gave me the papers to fill out. So I spent 2 years, 1 year at Columbia University, Teachers College, learning about the profession of counseling.
So it's a series of random events, but I think that's the way that a lot of lives go, right? It's a series of random events.
Well, so I eventually developed this theory.
Luck is no accident.
Luck is no accident was the name of the book. Luck is no accident. It should have been Luck is accident. Luck is the result of many accidents, is probably what the title should be. But luck is no accident is sort of another way of giving the same idea. So then I graduated from Columbia University. I thought, well, I've got to get a job now. And so how do you get a job? Well, you have to write letters. One of the things about this Iowa scholarship was you had to agree to go back to Iowa for 2 years after you graduated from Columbia University and get a job in Iowa. So I don't think they would have enforced it, but that was the rule, and I was always obedient to the rules. And so I went to the Columbia University library and found out the names and addresses of the superintendents of schools at 40 school districts in Iowa. And I wrote them a letter. And my friend Gert was a typist, and she did actually the typing of the letters for me, thank goodness. I wrote 40 letters, mailed them out, said, I've got a master's degree from Columbia University in counseling, and I'd like to apply for a counseling job in your school district, and blah, 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 blah. So how many of these 40 schools that I wrote to, superintendents I wrote to, how many do you think answered my letter?
40?
Or
one?
Less than 40, and more than one.
Okay.
It was 7.
Okay.
7.
That's a lot.
6 of them said, no, we don't have many positions open. One of the letters said, if you happen to be in the neighborhood, stop in. That's all it said. If you happen to be in the neighborhood, stop in. It didn't say we have an opening. It didn't say anything. Well, I thought, well, this is my only chance to get a job. So I've got to get back. And this letter came from Waterloo, Iowa. So I was talking to some other guy over there in New York, and he said, "Well, I'm driving to California. I could give you a ride." And I said, "Are you going to go through Iowa?" He said, "Yeah. You go right through Iowa in order to get to California from here." So I bummed a ride with him to California to Iowa, and then I don't know how I got to Waterloo. Iowa's not that big a place, and so I got to Waterloo. Oh, because the letter from Waterloo said, if you happen to be in the neighborhood, stop in. It didn't offer me a job or anything. If you happen to be in the neighborhood, stop in. So when I appeared in Waterloo, Iowa, I went to the principal who wrote me this letter, and I said, "Well, I just happened to be in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd stop in." That's what I said to him. Okay, good. Well, let's talk. So we started talking, and then he said, "Well, I'd like you to meet some of the other teachers, and we've got another counselor here. I'd like you to meet her." And so I started to meet all these other people, and we got friendly conversations going. And eventually, they offered me a job to be part-time counselor, half-time counselor, and half-time algebra teacher. Well, I was happy about that because algebra was actually my favorite subject when I was in high school. I liked algebra, and I understood algebra, and I thought I could do a good job of that as well as being a good counselor. So that's what I did. For 2 years, I was a half-time algebra teacher and half-time school counselor. I was a good algebra teacher, I think. I really liked algebra, and I think I did a good job of that. And I did counseling, and I did counseling in a way that I'd been taught at Columbia University, which was you have to really understand people. You have to listen to their problems. You have to be empathic, and yes, I understand what you're saying. Oh, they must feel bad, blah, 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 blah. See? But you never actually had to do anything with them, see. But I remember one male student in this at Waterloo, Iowa, that I counseled for about 7 different times, and he finally said to me, "Mr. Krumboltz, aren't we ever going to do anything? Aren't we ever going to do anything?" Well, I had never been taught that we ever should do anything, see, but then the next critical event was I joined the Iowa Personnel and Guidance Association, a group of people who did counseling in Iowa. And they were having a convention in Des Moines, Iowa. And so I got permission from my principal to go attend this convention in Des Moines, Iowa. And the speaker at that convention was a man named Willis E. Dugan. Willis E. Dugan was a professor at the University of Minnesota. And Professor Dugan gave a speech entitled, "The 18 Things That Every School Counselor Should Be Doing for Their Students." 18 things that the counselor should be doing for their students.
Because before they would just listen and
Just listening,
and reflect.
just listening.
And not make judgments.
You didn't have to do anything, see. You just had to listen to them and be empathic and tell them you understood how they felt. But Willis E. Dugan said there are 18 things you should be doing. For example, and he gave 18 specific things. I don't remember all 18 of them, but one of them I remember was, you should help the seniors in your high school get financial aid when they go to college. Did I ever help any seniors at Waterloo get financial aid? No, never even thought about it. Never even occurred to me that would be something where I might be helpful. Mm. I wrote down all 18 things that I was supposed to be doing, and I had been doing none of them.
And you didn't even know to do that, even though you went to
I didn't even know I was
teacher
supposed to do it, see. But Dugan gave his talk and convinced me I should be doing that kind of stuff. But I hadn't been doing it. So then I decided, this University of Minnesota, where Professor Dugan came from, must be a pretty good place for me. I should go there. I should go to the summer school there. See? And so I applied to go there for summer school, and they accepted me. And so that very summer, I traveled from Waterloo to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where the University of Minnesota is, and signed up for a bunch of classes. I was, learning lots and lots of things, and I was always a good student, and I always tried to do my best. And then I had a telephone call from the associate dean at in the School of Education at the University of Minnesota. Says, could you come in and see me? It was a woman, and I went in, talked to her, and she said, we're interested in you because you've been compiling a very good record here at Minnesota this summer, and we'd like to offer you a fellowship, and we want you to be a teaching assistant, TA, teaching assistant, for one of the professors. I said, well, maybe I'd be interested. Who's the professor that needs this? Oh, it's Professor Willis E. Dugan. Wow, what a coincidence. Dugan was the one who inspired me to come to Minnesota by his speech. See? And wow, I would really like to do that. But I had promised the people in Waterloo that I would return for a third year. And one of the things I had learned from my upbringing in the Presbyterian Church was that you should always keep your promises. See? I'd promised I would come back. Well, I didn't want to go back. So I thought, what should I do? I mean, this was a moral dilemma for me. See, what should I do about this situation? And I went to another professor who was also in the counseling field, very prominent, but very busy. And I told him this dilemma I had. And I said, what do you think I should do? Oh, and he was giving me the non-directive kind of thing. Well, you're concerned about what you should do. And so I left, and I wasn't happy. So I went back to see him a second time. I'm still puzzled about what I should do about this situation. And he just listened and blah, 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 blah. Sent me away. So I went back to see him a third time. Dr. Wren, that's his name, Wren. Dr. Wren, I said, listen, I really want to know what you think I should do about this dilemma I'm in. He thought for about a minute. Long minute. And then he said, John, you would be a fool to go back to Waterloo, Iowa. And I said, thank you, Dr. Wren. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. And so I went to the telephone and I called up the superintendent of schools in Waterloo. And I said, I know that I promised to return for a third year, but I have this opportunity to be a TA at the University of Minnesota, and I'd really kind of like to do that. How do you feel about that? And the superintendent of schools there said, oh, don't worry about it, John. It'd be easy to replace you. And I was not really flattered by that statement, but relieved. But relieved because so I didn't feel any guilt then. Didn't feel any guilt for not being able to go back and break my promise to return. And so I decided to stay at the University of Minnesota. And I entered their counseling psychology program at Minnesota and got acquainted and was appointed to be the TA for Professor Willis E. Dugan. So I was served as his TA for 1 year.
Did he kind of live up to your expectations?
Well, I was worried that I was not living up to his expectations. Because really all he wanted me was to be sort of a clerk to file his papers. See, and he wanted me to. He would put out a pile of papers that he wanted to have filed. See, and he had about 4 or 5 filing cabinets with 4 drawers in each filing cabinet. He wanted me to file his papers. I didn't know how to file papers. Here's a letter from so-and-so about such and such, which I don't even know what drawer to open and what folder to put it in. I mean, and he didn't give me any direction, see, and I was too scared to ask him. I don't know how to file. See, I was afraid to appear ignorant. I was ignorant, but I didn't want to appear ignorant. So I actually never filed any papers. They just stood in a pile. But he didn't seem to mind. He never criticized me for not filing his paper. But anyway, he was a good guy. He is a good guy, and I'm telling you all these stories. But everything is an accident. Everything is an accident. Nothing is planned. There was another fellow student who started in this program at the same time I did. His name was Bill Farquhar. And Bill and I kind of got to be buddy-buddy because we were both the 2 youngest guys in this program. Most of the other guys, now this was right after World War II ended, and most of the other students in the program were veterans, VA, sponsored by the VA, because they would pay for veterans to go to college. See, so most of them were veterans, and Bill and I were the 2 youngest guys in the program. So we were taking courses, and one day Bill says to me, "Hey John, we should write an article." There was a lot of prestige about writing articles that were published. See, we should write an article. Well, I said, "Well, Bill, we don't know anything." He said, "Well, we're taking this course in research methods." It was a teacher wasn't very good, but we were learning some stuff. We should write a letter about how to get an article published in a journal. Of course, we'd never published an article in a journal. We should learn how to do it. See? So well, okay, let's figure out how to do it. I agreed. Because it was Bill's idea to write this article. So he and I sat down together and we started thinking, well, what we were learning in this course that would be useful to put into our manuscript about how to get something published. And we wrote an article. It wasn't very long, about maybe 2 pages long, was about how long it was. 2 typewritten pages. And I mailed it into the editor of this journal, and the journal agreed to publish it. And so here, Bill Farquhar and I, the 2 youngest guys in this program, got an article published in a journal. Whereas all these other people who had much more experience and maturity had never published an article. So we were sort of, all of a sudden, the golden boys with the faculty at the University of Minnesota. So that's how I got started in life.
Then did you go straight from your PhD to become a Stanford professor?
No. That's not the way the world works. No, that's not how it works at all. So let's see, what happened next? Did I tell you when I made that trip to Minnesota to find out about, they had a program there that trained? Did I tell you what the guy told me there? He said, yeah, we have a program here. It's a pretty good program. There aren't very many women here. It's all men. Well, actually, we do have one woman who's good. Well, who's that? Well, her name is Brandhorst, Helen Brandhorst. When it came time to me to actually start my work there at the University of Minnesota, they had a gathering of all the students in the backyard of a faculty member's house. and they had a volleyball court back there, and so everybody who came was starting to play volleyball, just not keeping score or anything, but just for the fun of it, including this one, Helen Brandhorst. And after a while, they said, we're going to start having the meeting in the house. So when you're finished with the volleyball, come on in. So some of them started leaving volleyball, and pretty soon there were only two people left hitting the volleyball back and forth. Helen Brandhorst on one side and John Krumboltz on the other side of the net. And we were just hitting this ball back and forth over the net. And I said to her, "You're the kind of woman I'd like to marry." And she just laughed at me. We started dating each other after we started full-time there. And eventually we got married. So that's how I got married the first time. First time I got married. Okay, I'm telling you all these ridiculous stories, but they're all true. But they all illustrate how random life is. So Helen and I got married. We were both continuing our doctoral work, and it got, in the first year we were there over the Christmas holidays, see. And we both had traditions of spending Christmas with our families and so on, but there was some reason that we couldn't do it that year. My parents were both Presbyterians. Helen's parents were both Presbyterians, so we were both Presbyterians. And we wanted to go to some church, but we had sort of both given up on Presbyterianism, and we wanted to go to some different kind of church. So I went to the telephone book. Back in the days when there were telephone books, you remember those days?
Oh, yeah.
And looked up places to go for, for a ceremony, churches, sort of church-type places. See? And there was a long list of churches. And I was looking for some church that was not Presbyterian, it was not Methodist, it was not Catholic, it was not any of the traditional churches. And there's one called the Spiritualist Church. I wonder what a Spiritualist church would be like. Well, let's go try it. One evening, it may have been Christmas Eve, we went to this spiritual church. They were having a service there. Medium-sized crowd there, and we sat sort of in the middle of the crowd. And then the leader of the Spiritualist church came out and sort of gave us a little talk. She said, "I'm getting a message from the spirit world. The spirit world is sending you a message. I'm sending somebody in this group a message. It's somebody in this group who is wearing a blue shirt." I was wearing a blue shirt. Nobody else in that audience was wearing a blue shirt. It's a message for someone in this audience who's wearing a blue shirt. And she sort of pointed to me. And she asked, "Sir, would you stand up?" So, okay, so I stood up, see. And she says, "The Spirit wants me to tell you the message. It's a prediction of what's going to happen to you. Do you want to hear it?" Yeah, I want to hear it. What's going to happen to me? Exactly 6 months from today, you are going to be sleeping in San Antonio, Texas. Period. I had never been to Texas. My wife had never been to Texas. We didn't know anybody in Texas. We didn't know any reason to go to Texas. But that was the prediction. Well, now I probably have to tell you another story because otherwise this is not going to make any sense to you. I enrolled in ROTC, but one of the agreements when you sign up for ROTC, you have to serve for 2 years in the military after you graduate. So I had to agree to serve in the United States Air Force for 2 years after I graduated. But because of all these other things, it didn't happen right away. But then I got a letter from the United States Air Force saying that I had now been ordered to report for duty at Lackland Air Force Base. Do you know where Lackland Air Force Base is located? San Antonio, Texas. And the date I was supposed to report was exactly 6 months after I had been told that I would be sleeping in San Antonio, Texas, 6 months after they had given me this prediction. As it worked out, it was exactly 6 months, and it was exactly 6 months that I slept overnight in San Antonio, Texas, because that's where Lowry Air Force Base was headquartered. The Air Force wanted me to do personnel research. So it was building tests to select pilots to fly airplanes for the Air Force. That was part of my job. Not all by myself, of course. There were a whole team of people that were working on it, and I was kind of learning my way in this world. At that time, the United States and Russia were on knucklehead terms with each other. And everybody in the United States was afraid that the Russians were going to bomb the United States. I was so afraid that my father actually built a bomb shelter in the basement of our house in Cedar Rapids. I don't think they would have bombed Cedar Rapids, Iowa, but my father was afraid of it, see? So he built this bomb shelter in the basement. My job there was to help build tests to select pilots who would fly U.S. planes. So I got, and to do that, we had to do a lot of research of what kind of tests would be best to select the people. My best friend there was a civilian. By this time I was a first lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force, because going through ROTC, you see, I got this, doing all this research work because I'd gotten a PhD from the University of Minnesota. My buddy in San Antonio and I would write articles about what we found out, and it was with the Air Force. We could publish them anywhere we wanted, see, so we would send them to professional journals around the nation, see, and they would publish our research results, 5, 6, 7 articles published in journals. Almost all of them had a co-author with them, but my name was in there. After my 2 years of service were up, I really had to get a job, and I by that time I had a PhD, and so it was sort of expected I would work for a university. I contacted Willis E. Dugan, and he had a friend who was a dean at the Michigan State University, and they were looking for somebody sort of like me, and he recommended me, and so Dean there hired me to go to Michigan State University to work there on the faculty, and that was where Helen and I had 2 daughters, Anne and Jenny, who still I see often these days. But that's where they were born. Well, that's where one of them was born anyway. And Anne was actually born in San Antonio, but Jenny was born in Michigan. Okay, so there I am at Michigan State, and one day I get a letter in the mail from Stanford University. It says, "We are looking for a professor in education and psychology, and your name was given to us, and we're wondering if you would be interested in coming out to visit with us and interview for this position." Talked it over with Helen, and she was kind of enthusiastic about this idea because she'd done some of her undergraduate work at some school in Southern California, and she liked California. Yeah, I think we ought to go and take a look at that, see. So I made airline reservations and flew out to California, and this committee was made up of about half of the faculty were from education and half were from the psychology department. And since I'd majored in educational psychology, I really had all the sort of the apparent credentials that they were looking for. They asked me a whole bunch of questions about how would you do this, that, and blah, blah, blah. And I gave them straight answers, and I'd had a lot of experience doing research. As I had a lot of experience doing research, I had prepared a little sort of a page of summary of my career, resume of my career with all my publications on it. As I was doing it, I would update the thing every now and then. The point is that Stanford decided to offer me the job. I did some thinking about it, and Helen was very enthusiastic about it. So eventually we decided, okay, we'll accept this position at Stanford University. And one of the faculty members who was at that meeting was the professor who had the office where we are sitting right now. So I got hired to teach here, and I did, and I had the office right across the hall from this office here. And then another very bad but significant event was that the professor whose office this was died suddenly, unexpectedly, when he was at a convention down in Southern California. And it was a shock to everybody in the state because he was a very well-liked man. And his field was school counseling. Well, now I had been a school counselor, not a very good one, but I had been a school counselor. And they needed somebody to teach counseling here. So I was sort of it. So I was selected to run the counselor training program at School of Education, Stanford University. Since the people who were on this committee had hired me, I was half-time in the psychology department and half-time in the School of Education. So my title was Associate Professor of Education, and then I became professor. I got promoted to Professor of Education and Psychology. And that was a title that I had attached to my name for about 50 years.
Did you have tenure right away?
Oh, no. No, I had to earn tenure. So that's how it happened. And I have been here ever since. And here, the three of us are sitting.
Did you ever feel worried that you weren't good enough to be a Stanford professor?
No, I never thought that.
Because Stanford professors are such high up in intelligence.
Never worried about that at all. I'm here to do my job. They want me to teach. They want me to do research. And I taught and I did research. And I did many more research studies, published many more articles. I've now published 10 books, I think. And I haven't counted recently, but it's about 10. That's the story.
What I'm taking from this story is everybody kind of goes through life in a random way, and you're just calling it out as what it is. It's a random series of events in everyone's lives. One of the takeaways you said while the mic was off was you have the option to take advantage of that random opportunity or not.
My message is that everyone is affected by random events in their life. You didn't control when you were born or where you were born. You didn't control who your parents were, and you didn't control where you were going to go to school at first. All of these events are random, but all had a magnificent effect on your life. Now, you could say I was unlucky. You could say I was lucky. You could say whatever you want to say. You could evaluate it however you say it. But it doesn't matter how you evaluate it. The main thing is what you should do about it. And so the moral of this story is that you should take advantage of all these unplanned events that you encounter. Take advantage of them. Don't avoid them. There were times where I was tempted to refuse some opportunity because I'd say, well, I don't know how to do that. Somebody would say, well, come on and do it anyway. And so I would do that. I would come and do things that I didn't know how to do, and I would learn how to do it. Like, I haven't even told you about this, but I became a radio announcer for a while. Somebody at this church where I was going needed a male announcer. She said she liked my voice. So I went and became a radio announcer at station WMT in Cedar Rapids, Iowa for about 3 or 4 months. A radio announcer. Never had any training in it at all. Didn't know how to do it, but I did it. And now I know how to be a radio announcer. How did I know? Because I did it. And if somebody asked me to be a radio announcer now, I'd say, well, sure, be glad to do it. Nobody's ever asked me, though.